Welcome to the Whole Athlete Podcast, where we focus on discussing topics to help you become a fat burner, optimize health, and improve performance in life and sports. Transform the whole you from the inside out with the holistic method. Let's dive in. Here's your host, Debbie Potts.
Hey everybody, it's Debbie Potts, the host of the Whole Athlete Podcast, and I've got another host of a podcast, Rich Soares, on the line today to be my partner in crime.
Hey Debbie, thanks for letting me join you.
Well, I thought you are a great co-host to have on the show today to talk about the endurance world, since you're based in Colorado and your podcast is all about endurance athletes and training and racing and performance and longevity. And we are recording this in kind of end of April. Summer's coming up, peak race season. And I want to talk about ways we can improve our performance this year in race season for endurance athletes of all sports. But also, as I keep saying, it's more about what's beyond the race and keep talking about longevity and improving our health at a cellular level and reducing that oxidative stress and chronic stress we're putting on our bodies. So let's have you kind of talk what you've been doing on your podcast and give us a little update, and we'll kind of just roll with it.
That sounds awesome. Yeah, so as you mentioned, I am an endurance coach. I coach athletes, but I also host a podcast called Mile High Endurance. And our approach to the podcast is really try to help our listeners get motivated about endurance sports, but also learn and feel their way through this journey of kind of finding themselves and finding their best performance and their best health by connecting them with coaches, experts, and other professional athletes that have information to share. I certainly don't claim to be an expert. I really take pride in being able to find really good experts and bring them to our audience. But through that process, I tend to learn a fair amount. And so a lot of what I probably share today will be things that I've picked up from some of the really wonderful guests that we've had on the podcast.
And you have a lot of professional athletes and top age groupers on your show, right?
In the recent weeks, we've had just some spectacular guests. We've had professional triathlete Sam Long talking about some of his most recent races and his preparation for his season. We've also had Alex Hutchinson, who is the author of the New York Times bestseller, Endure, which is an incredible book that has hundreds of studies on various aspects of endurance and ties a thread through the entire book of Nike's Breaking 2 experiment as kind of an anchor point for the entire book, which was awesome. And just this week, this coming weekend show, we have Ironman Hall of Famer Julie Moss talking about her book that just came out a few months ago called Crawl of Fame. And what an amazing story, what an amazing woman. And really, I commend people to read the book and check out the interview.
Yeah, I saw a picture of you on social media or a picture of your books with all the tabs in it. It looks like my books. There's so many great books to read out there. So let's go kind of start with the theme of what I've been writing and speaking about and creating some seminars for athletes of all levels, performance and chronic stress. And as we've talked before about Life is Not a Race, my book and personal story and journey, so I see a lot of athletes training and they're always working on improving performance. But as I talk about my show, it's training the whole athlete from the inside out with the holistic method, that it's not just their exercise. We need to look at our training method because we're putting so much stress on our body with the type of exercise we're doing and doing, longer than 45-minute sessions. And as a triathlete or, 50K runner, whatever endurance sport you're in, it's hard to manage stress from our exercise, but also our daily life, the food we're eating, the toxins in our environment. So start with what you've learned from your experience with athletes. What are common sources of stress for people that might be limiting or impacting their ability to perform their best in their sport?
Yeah, I like the way you set that up. I think one of the things to keep in mind through all of this is that the human body is not magic, right? We're just a very complex organism, right? And we respond to stress from all sorts of things, right? It's not just training. It's not just what we eat, but it's about our environment. It's about the thoughts that go through our minds throughout the day. It's about the things that stress us out, whether it's, work or a hard day with a coworker, or it's something that's going on in the family or what have you, right? It's a lot of things. But I think a lot of the most common things that I see that affect athletes and athletic performance are, too much stress that comes in the form of too much intensity, too little recovery, and you can argue that those are just two sides of the same coin, but we'll talk about that in greater length, and nutrition. And I think that these three things are so very interrelated. It's you can try to pull them apart, but they all come back together again at some point in time.
Yeah. So overtraining, under recovery.
And I would say overtraining as in getting too much intensity, or taking the idea or the concept of progressive overload and making those ramp rates too steep. And we can talk about that.
Yeah. So I've been writing a lot and kind of going back to my books that are almost, 10 years, the Volek and Finney low carbohydrate performance book, my Maffetone book, Training for Endurance. And I just was like, I'm going to look back on these. And Bob Seebehar, I did his metabolic efficiency course back in 2013. And so I'm reading over all this stuff. It's like, you know what? I've been doing this for so long, and now it's becoming more out there, being a fat burning machine. But I think metabolic efficiency and metabolic flexibility, I've been trying to write some more blogs and doing my solo Thursday podcast, Real Thoughts with Debbie Potts, talking about the importance of that for endurance athletes specifically, is that you're putting so much stress in your body, but at what heart rates to train at that you're burning the most fat, and not doing such high intensity that you're doing kind of that black hole training that I think a lot of people do, that they're just staying up that high heart rate the whole workout. Is that something you're looking at yourself or dabbling into?
First of all, I got to say, I was listening to, what was it? What did you say? Training Thoughts with Debbie Potts? I can't remember what it was.
Real Thoughts with Debbie Potts.
I just heard it this week, and I loved it. And I also love that you had referenced your work with Bob Seebehar. Bob and I actually did an experiment just last year, and it was interesting. I actually ended up having two pretty back-to-back interviews, one with Dr. Nigo Samalan and the other with Bob Seebehar. And Dr. Nigo Samalan, for those who may not know, used to be the head physician at the CU Sports Medicine and Performance Center. And one of the things that we did when I met with him is we did a muscle ultrasound to be able to test the glycogen levels in various muscles throughout my body. And we also did a metabolic efficiency test and lactate threshold test on a treadmill. And one of the things that we found, and it's a pretty typical scenario, here's a scenario, typical athlete, where I'm not losing weight, I'm bonking early, and I've started to experience a kind of chronic loss of power. And some of the big insights that we found was I had a higher than average glycogen burn, even at very low intensities. I had extremely low glycogen reserves, and I had assumed that I was fat adapted, which would have meant that I had a I had the ability to go farther and burn less carbohydrate. And what we found was it was actually not the case at all. And so Bob Seebehar.
Did Bob do your test, or someone else do it? Because he does a metabolic crossover point and looking at your RQ value.
We're going there. So it was interesting. So we published that interview with Inigo, and Bob Seebehar listened to it and reached out and said, he proposed that we do an experiment. So we decided to put together a testing protocol, and the experiment was going to be essentially a 7-week process where we would do a pre-metabolic exchange test and hooked up to the cart, the whole 9 yards. Then we would work on, and we would baseline my nutrition, and then he would adjust my nutrition for basically call it periodized nutrition plan to become more fat adapted and a more metabolically efficient diet for 7 weeks. And then we would retest. And this kind of is going to get to the point of where we start to incur more stress on our bodies in our training. So the metabolic exchange point is obviously the point, and I think that you did a good job of describing this past week on your show, where you start to burn more carbohydrate than fat. That point where those two lines cross over as your intensity increases. And in my case, that metabolic exchange point was at a very low intensity, meaning I was starting to burn more carbohydrate at a much slower pace than I thought I was. But one of the insights that I became very aware of as we did this test is you can feel it in your body. You can become aware of how your body feels. And for me personally, my legs just start to feel extremely heavy when I hit that metabolic exchange point. And that really is at the point where you're also starting to create a lot more stress for your body when you cross that point. And if you're training above that metabolic exchange point, you are chronically putting yourself in a higher stress training experience. And that over time is going to chronically deplete you of your glycogen stores. Mm-hmm. And if you're not getting adequate recovery, adequate sleep, which is a whole nother topic we're going to get into here in another minute, and another one of the physicians that's been on the show as a guest on Mile High Endurance, you really start to get yourself into a pretty serious hole, and the whole cycle of not being able to lose weight and other pretty serious physical conditions can spawn off of that, as I think you know. So let me kind of really quickly kind of share with you, if you want to know the kind of the before and after effects.
Yes, I love this stuff. I realize this is my favorite topic.
Oh yeah, I'm geeking out. This is so much fun. So here's what we did. So in test number 1, this is roughly, I'm going to say June 6th, I think, of 2018, we did test number 1. Now, my metabolic exchange rate, or the metabolic exchange point for test number 1 was a pace of 923 and a heart rate of 151. 7 weeks later, my metabolic exchange point was a pace of 827 at a heart rate of 158.
Wow.
Huge, right?
Yeah.
So get this. So then my percent of carb versus fat burn in test number 1 I'll go ahead and just make this simple, at a pace of 10 minutes and 20 seconds. So it's a pretty slow run. Was 84% was coming from
fat.
Carbohydrate. Nope.
Oh.
So 84% coming from carbohydrate, 52% from fat. In test number 2, at that same pace, 37% carbohydrate, 63% fat.
Oh. Wow.
So that's a 11-point difference, 11-point swing.
Yeah. After that 7 weeks of training.
7 weeks. Well, and that's really not changing my training at all. Mm-hmm. That was just changing my diet, just becoming more metabolically targeted in the calories I was taking in.
Okay.
And then if you take the carbohydrate the carbohydrate calories per hour, and you figure out what that translated to at a 9:23 pace. Before we did at the beginning of this exercise, I was burning 480 calories of carbohydrate an hour at a 9:23 pace after 3:52. Think about what that does to your digestive system in a race situation. That's like two fewer gels an hour.
Yeah. That's a big part of his GI stress, I think, for people in a race. And to me, not to have to take gels and sugars and stuff, it's just, when I figured this out back in 2005, when I started doing this, I was like, oh my gosh, this is so much easier. I don't have to take this 500 calorie drink that I ended up throwing up, TMI, but I'd be riding the bike like, it's not going down there, it's coming back up, and then having to take gels just because, you're told all this information back then, every hour you need this many calories, and then the run. And I still see people, the gels taped on their top tube and everything. It's funny, but so I want to, before I forget, the diet part. So what you changed was nutrition, not your exercise. So you didn't change your training doing lower heart rate or training in your peak aerobic fat burning numbers at all, just food wise.
We were just changing the food. We did not change anything at all related to my training, which is really remarkable. Mm-hmm. That was just by changing food. Now, you add to that, and this is where we're going to, I hope we go next, is this concept of training at too high of an intensity too often, or training in that kind of gray zone too often.
Yeah, black hole, I say.
Black hole, I love that term. That's a great one. Yeah, so whenever you're ready, you tell me, and you kind of tee it up however you want to tee it up, and we'll go there.
I want to still go on the nutrition part. I'm curious, what did you do nutritionally? Because we talk a lot about low carb, higher fat. I'm always about balance your blood sugar. And a big topic lately is intermittent fasting, fasted workout. So what did you do just your nutrition to make those changes without touching the heart rate training in your exercise session for your phase 1 test?
Yeah, it's really funny. We did not do anything. We didn't do anything extreme. Let's put it that way. We did target some very specific. So we first of all figured out what my resting metabolic rate was, right? We wanted to figure out what my base calorie burn was throughout the day. And one of the things that we discovered is I was probably taking in a few too many calories to start with, but I was also taking in way more carbohydrate than I needed to. Mm-hmm. And so what we targeted was, I think, getting this, if I can get this right, 104 grams of 104 grams of carbohydrate per day, and then 116 each of fat and protein per day. And that was it. I just tried to stick to that. And was I perfect? Did I nail it every day? No, I didn't. But I got pretty close. Most days I was pretty good. I kept a daily log. I exported the daily log out of MyFitnessPal, every week into a spreadsheet, sent it to Bob, hey, good, bad, and ugly, here it is. And, we'd kind of score it green, yellow, red in terms of how well I did on a daily basis. We also periodized the nutrition. So on days where I had a high intensity workout, or my workout was greater than, I think it was 2.5 hours, maybe 3 hours, those days I was taking in double the carbs in terms of grams.
Yeah, it makes sense. A lot of people are doing that, more for, I think people in the low carb world, keto world, they don't really, there's not a lot of endurance exercise people doing it. So you have to go, okay, there's, I think, a lot more research, and Mike Mutzel talks a lot about this, and Ben Greenfield about cyclical keto refeeding is a blog that they had in the Get Keon page, that as the coaches, we got this information, but it is refeeding. And I do it automatically because you're going to go for a 50-mile bike ride or something, and then I'm going to run, that you just automatically end up eating more. But during weekdays when I haven't eaten yet today, I can do more fasted day, but I know my body tend to eat more on the weekend. So you kind of, listen to your body is what I tell people, and, eat the right amount, but you can tell you automatically eat more carbs. So it makes sense kind of your innate intelligence will drive you that way.
Right. And I know that there's a lot of, other approaches here. Intermittent fasting, obviously one. We've talked to Bob Seebahar about that. But what I guess my point in all of this is, this wasn't a drastic lifestyle change. This was just tweaking things. And so my point is that you can make a really drastic change in your performance and your ability to, race faster with less fuel, less carbohydrate, with less GI distress, and less just overall physical distress. I mean, now in this post-test, that point where my legs felt heavier, the point where I started to incur more physiological stress was literally at a minute faster pace than it was in the test prior.
And that's 9:23 pace and 8:27 pace by just adjusting your macronutrients.
That's it.
Food plan.
That's it. I didn't increase my volume of low intensity, so I wasn't getting any more vascular density. I wasn't getting any more mitochondrial density and size because it really wasn't increasing the volume. It was really just a matter of the diet.
So that was your phase 1. Then did you do the exercise prior? Is that your next? Am I going the right direction?
Yeah, you're going the right direction. Yeah. So this has really been one of those things that, we talked about this recently on our show where when I was first starting out as an endurance athlete, it was really hard for me to, when I had a coach who was coaching me, trying to tell me, you need to go slow to go fast. That whole go slow to go fast, I thought that concept was just bunk. How can this easy, slow, embarrassingly slow workout actually make me faster? Just didn't get it, didn't buy it, right?
That's more of the MAF training, the max aerobic function. Is that what you were?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So there's a lot of people that write about this. Phil Maffetone, obviously, Matt Fitzgerald and his 80-20 rule. And you ask, it's funny, one of the standard questions we ask every pro athlete who comes on our show for an interview, we ask about their training, right? And inevitably, and you go back and listen to, Sam Long talk about his training. He says, "Oh yeah, I train so hard." I'm like, "Tell me what you mean by training hard." He's like, "I just do a lot of volume." I'm like, "Yeah, is it a lot of volume or is it a lot of intensity?" "Oh no, it's 80% of it's just really low, easy volume." And that's the key, right? To be able to spend time in that aerobic state. Not anaerobic, aerobic state, low intensity, and develop that mitochondrial density, the mitochondrial size that comes from that, the vascular density, and that volume really is what ends up, and we'll talk a little bit about some of the insights from Dr. Inigo Samalan, really helps give you that greater glycogen reserves because you're not depleting yourself, but it also really kind of helps you build the physiological capabilities to burn off the lactate that gets produced at those higher intensities.
Yeah, so you're building up that aerobic engine and being more efficient and more metabolically flexible.
That's right.
But I think that so many people, like we said, your big thing of too high intensity is a big stressor and under recovery. And I think that's a part of it is that 80-20 principle the Maffetone talked about for years is doing that Whitney minus age heart rate test, train in those ranges, or ideally we do a metabolic test because if you found out like your 158 heart rate, you're still be able to, what your peak fat burning heart rate ranges are. So like when I would do metabolic testing is look at the data and go, okay, where was I burning the most fat and on what heart rate and figure out what is the highest heart rate I can go and burn the most fat and figure out to train those ranges, which ironically, I always would compare it against if they were just doing the MAF test. And I was like, how did he ever figure this out? Because it was almost all the time, not 100% of the time, but a lot of time it was that MAF heart rate. So you can get expensive tests and really know what exactly is going on at every heart rate, but also inexpensive ways, just 180 minus your age, plus or minus 5 beats, depending on fitness and illness and whatnot.
And I would emphasize something that you've been saying on your show, which is test, don't guess.
Yes.
Right?
Yeah, for sure.
I mean, because if you don't know, you honestly don't know, right?
Mm-mm.
If you haven't tested, you are truly, truly guessing.
And to get the test, I think I was writing a blog about this morning because I'm trying to put together an ebook on metabolically efficient athletes and how to train. And the whole thing I keep getting into more so is the whole mitochondrial health and mitochondrial damage that we can do to our cell health by overtraining and too much stress. And there's a great thing, it's a different topic we'll may hopefully get into today or another time, but just the source of stress. This guy, Ari, Energy Blueprint Masterclass, I was following him on the building a cellular engine, and how, I think it's important thing to dive deeper into for endurance athletes when we're training and damaging ourselves, but we need more mitochondria and finding that right balance that we're not putting too much stress in our body so we can improve performance and longevity. But the cell health, I think, is so important. As you mentioned, the mitochondrial is like a whole nother show.
Yeah, for sure.
So the other thing you're talking about, nutrition and under recovery, overtraining. But the thing I thought about, wrote down here, is the nutrition changes you made, but also the tweaks in lifestyle habits. So we mentioned sleep. And I think a lot of things, it was on the news too. It's like, oh, that's nothing new. We talk about this all the time, that if you don't eat too close to bed and eat 3 hours before you go to bed, and you can optimize your sleep and your recovery and repair while you're sleeping. So have you gotten into kind of the biohacking world of improving performance by doing any other things besides nutrition and the heart rate?
Yeah, I'll tell you what, one of the greatest, I should say, one of the things I'm most grateful for with doing podcasting like you do is the people that you get to talk to. And I was listening to an interview on a podcast. This is the Unbeatable Mind podcast by Mark Divine, and he had a guest, Dr. Kirk Parsley. Now, Mark Divine is a former Navy SEAL, and Dr. Kirk Parsley is also a former Navy SEAL. In fact, he was the doctor in, I think, probably his Navy SEAL unit, or served their Navy SEAL unit. And one of the things he did was he kept treating Navy SEALs for a lot of various ailments. And what he started to understand or identify as a pattern was that a lot of the issues that they were having in performance, in health, in cognition, and so forth, had to do with lack of sleep. And he ended up becoming a sleep specialist, really taking his, what he focused on in terms of research into the area of sleep as a sleep specialist. And what he was sharing in this podcast, so I had to have him on my podcast, of course, because what I kept hearing was, oh my gosh, this isn't going to just affect special operators, right? Or emergency responders, which is really kind of his specialty, right? Because these are people who, by virtue of the type of work that they do, they don't have pretty regular sleep patterns, right? I'm like, this is the kind of stuff that affects athletes. So he talked about some pretty scary statistics, if you will. One of them was, with just 2 hours less sleep, just 2 hours. So if you're not getting that kind of 7 to 9, so imagine you're only getting like 5 to 7, 6 hours of, let's say just 6 for easy math here, your insulin sensitivity drops 30% with just one night of 2 hours less sleep. You start to do that chronically. Now, I'm the kind of guy prior to this interview who thought that sleep was a luxury. Like, I've got to get in work, and I've got to get in my training, and sleep, it's an afterthought. Who cares? I'll tell you what, I came away from this interview, and my first priority is getting 8 hours of sleep. I went out and found the world's best earplugs. I found a sleep mask, eye mask. I turn off everything with blue light. 90 minutes before sleep, I do yoga, I meditate, I, get myself, I don't eat, for 3 or 4, probably 4 hours before bed, just to get that melatonin rolling, and get it rolling naturally.
Mm-hmm.
Now, the other thing I'll tell you that came out of this was, so deep sleep, by the way, is the only way that your body really repairs itself and your immune system really repairs itself, and you decrease inflammation and start to replenish glycogen. So part of the reason that I was chronically depleted of glycogen was I wasn't getting enough sleep.
Isn't that funny? I mean, just simple thing is just you
simple things.
Sleep. It's not so much you're eating, but what you're doing before bed, and that impacts your ability to get deep sleep.
And I'll even confess something else, which I confessed on my show, right? Which was part of what I thought I needed to be able to help me sleep was the occasional Ambien. I took the generic version, Zolpidem, and I would go to bed. I could fall asleep, no problem. But about 2 hours later, I would wake up and I would take a half of Zolpidem to be able to get me back to sleep. What I learned through this, and what he eventually understood, what he eventually learned in his practice, because he actually he was prescribing Ambien to his special ops patients to help them sleep. But he didn't realize until he did more research that all it does is just knock you out. It makes you unconscious. It doesn't really help get you into that natural deep sleep. So you never really get the benefit of deep sleep. Man, I quit that crap cold turkey.
That's interesting. I know a lot of people take that, and I've been trying to explain more of the benefits of sleep and what you do before bed and writing about that, because it is what you said, the blue light, sleeping, it helps your sleep. But, first thing in the morning, help your circadian rhythm by getting out, nature walks, get out daylight. Yeah. And so it's like what we do all day long impacts that sleep. Is not just right before you hit the pillow, but there's a lot of things that goes into that good quality sleep. And I don't understand people don't sleep. I myself learned that 5 years ago that sleep is a priority. So I just was saying that on my podcast the other day. It's like, all right, I don't have a lot of social life plans during the week because I need my sleep, and that's a priority. My health is big to me. So if I need to be home at 7:30 at night, and it means I don't go out to dinner with people and only have 2 nights on the weekend that I can schedule things, that's what I end up doing, because it's so essential to your health to have a good quality sleep.
Sleep is probably the single most important thing that you can do to make those metabolic improvements in your training. Absolutely. I mean, everything else that you're doing, all that other training is pretty catabolic, right?
Mm-hmm.
What you need is that sleep. Inadequate sleep leads to just adverse glucose metabolism, just
your body repairs at a cellular level, and detoxification, actually, the internal housekeeping happens while you're sleeping as well. So I always tell people, if you're going to bed and the growth hormone and all this stuff happens, and so if you're going to bed at 11 p.m., midnight, and you're waking up at 5, 6 in the morning, you're probably going to have more inflammation in your body, more aches and pains, and have more congested liver because your body's not able to do its job while you're asleep. So it should be a priority.
Yeah.
So the other topic is sleep, but in stress we're talking about. The other things I really find for health is mobility is my other element of the holistic method that people are training all the time. But I think it's, that position on the bike and swimming and all this forward movement. But I think mobility is so important. And to add, if you're, doing your training in the morning, but that you're sitting at a desk all day, I think that's another source of stress, or it could be impairment to performance because you're so tight and your muscles are so imbalanced that you have limited range of motion. So you're not going to fire the correct muscles as well as you should if you had more flexibility. And you said you're doing yoga at night. So if you found doing more mobility drills during the day or doing more stretching at nighttime is helping you as an athlete?
Well, I'll tell you, I'll start by saying I wish I did more of it, and I wish I was better at this. But I do a few very simple things that don't take up extra time or get in the way too much. So first of all, I do take advantage of the evening because I do need to start to quiet things down to be sure that I get into a good pre-sleep pattern so that I can easily get into a deep sleep. So I naturally have to take away stimulation. If I'm going to take away stimulation, it's a great time to do some yoga, do some stretches, I do some deep breathing. Basically, I call it box breathing, which is just doing very deep belly breaths in a equal pattern of inhale, hold, exhale, hold. So that's my kind of evening routine. During the day, I sit on a exercise ball, so I don't sit in a chair and slouch. I have a chair. It's kind of funny because people come to my office and talk to me, and they kind of get a little bit of smile because I'm sitting there, I'm bouncing up and down. It's kind of hard to take me seriously, which is okay because that just keeps the mood light. And so I've got that, and then I will use that same ball if I'm on a conference call, and I will do some mobility movements, whether they're single leg lunges with one leg back on the ball, or I'll just do a little bit of work, some ab work, a little core work with that ball while I'm on a call, and nobody ever knows the difference.
Yeah, I know. Foam roller is great. We have. It's funny because you can tell we're athletes in our house. It's just we don't have kids. So our downstairs room here by my office has a biomat. So it's a farm-fed heater mat. And we have Normatec, and we've got the vibrator ball and the foam roller and the rumble roller and all these tools there. So I never sit on the chair or sofa. If we watch a TV show, I'm always lying on the floor, sitting on the floor, because then you stretch more and you're just not sitting there in an awkward position on the sofa and slouching. So I myself find I'm drawn more to sitting on the floor and lying down that way and doing some drills.
Yeah,
but I did try doing since it was spring, the weather was nice here. I did 2 videos that I'm going to try to do more on, just like 8-minute mobility drills people can do at home. And I have, just 2 videos on my new YouTube channel. I made Debbie Potts workouts, but I'm going to try to do that more because it's so easy to just do 5 minutes. Here's some different stretches, and I do Pilates mat, and I teach yoga as well, that it's just so easy to throw in stuff throughout the day, or just spend, like you said, 5 minutes, 10 minutes at nighttime to help shift from your busy day to evening and getting that evening ritual pre-bed so you can shift into that increased melatonin and lower that cortisol from the busy day.
Yeah, perfect.
Okay, next on the holistic method elements that affects our performance longevity is digestion and gut health. So I've done a lot of this as a nutritional therapist, and we're going to get Matt Smith on the show to talk about that. But I think digestion in nutritional therapy is pretty huge. And I think so many people as athletes, because we're often busy and multitasking, and I mean, it's just not just athletes, but our whole society has digestion issues, which relate to all sorts of gut dysbiosis and, not the right stomach acids. We're not breaking our food down, and having gut biome issues, leaky gut, and all sorts of things. So what have you learned from your podcast world and your own experiment of eating healthy? But the other part of it is what you're able to digest and what nutrients you're able to absorb and hold into your body.
Well, I'll tell you what, this probably won't be a very exciting answer, because this is probably the one area where I personally have the greatest opportunity to learn more and to probably improve personally. I think I've been blessed. I haven't had what I would consider to be digestive issues that I am consciously aware of, like things that make me dysfunctional, in my daily life, in my training and exercising. I usually have as long as the one thing that I have struggled with has been hydration and getting my sodium concentration correct in my longer races. Besides that, I really don't have a huge issue with kind of gut biome and leaky gut or any of those things. So I kind of leave that to other experts. And I wish that I had more guests like you have on that topic. I probably need to listen to your show a little bit more and start to get some ideas.
Well, so I've been trying to write another. I've got too many things I always like to do because I need to just do this full time, but it doesn't. If I do this for free, so researching is just so interesting to me, and writing up the ebook on digestion and gut health for athletes, because there's just free things you can do. Free and three is sit, relax when you're eating, be quiet, and you have to. What I always talk about, that parasympathetic nervous system, because we're always in sympathetic mode. So we got to shift to parasympathetic when we eat. So taking 2 or 3 deep breaths in, relaxing, and then taking a bite. That's easy to do. Chewing our food. We're supposed to chew 20 to 30 times. We probably chew like 2 times and then swallow. So that's a big thing for people. We eat so fast and just that's slowing down. Yep. So I think that's an easy way to work on digestion. Because in nutritional therapies, practitioners, we coach people work north to south. One is like your brain is north point. So we got to get parasympathetic and get the saliva and everything working when you start to relax and digest your food properly. But then the third thing is, chewing your food second and eating slowly. But sometimes we need to get digestive enzymes, and stomach acid is usually not the right amount. So people that have acid reflux is a topic I'm going to do on a show coming up here with the Bio Optimizer guys, talking about the need for HCl supplement betaine, because so many people are trained, if you have not digesting your food and you have the acid reflux, often we need more acidity instead of taking the anti-acid pills. So I think so many people in athletes, we're not breaking down our food, because the first organ goes into in the digestive system is our stomach, the organ. And we need a pH scale 1.5 to 3 acidity to emulsify and liquefy that food properly, so it goes down to the next phase into the small intestine correctly. So things that we can do is, having apple cider vinegar, having that with some warm water, and lemon in there before you eat, not drinking a ton of water. I used to drink so many glasses of water when I'd be out eating a meal, and I had no idea that I was diluting my stomach acid. So that's another thing to do. And just maybe taking HCl betaine type of supplement that works for you. And you can do a test that how many you need, until you feel an acidic burning feeling. That's when you've had your amount you need. So I know from chronic stress and from just our lifestyle, for me, I can take a whole bunch of those and not feel anything. So I know I'm really low in the right stomach acid. So if you're not breaking down your proteins, think what proteins break into those amino acids and our enzymes and our hormones and what's made from proteins, I think is so essential for athletes. So digestive enzymes and HCl supplements often really beneficial. I think that's a big part, digestion. Then the gut biome, we've done amazing podcasts, 2 of them with Karan, who's the chief scientific officer. He's like the expert in the microbiome. And we did 2 podcasts on Megaspore Biotic and their company, but also the gut biome, how important that is for performance and weight loss and health and really longevity.
Well, you just sold yourself as the next guest on our show. So.
Well, I just find digestion is such a fascinating topic, and it's something we never look at for athletic performance. And I think if you're not, everyone talks about nutrition and what you're eating and exercise, but no one's really talking about, are you eating that food? Are you even breaking down that food and absorbing those nutrients? Because I wasn't forever. And it's like, all right, I'm eating all this good food. 1, how come I'm not full? Well, I didn't break it down properly. And 2, why don't I feel that energy? And if you eat the right amount of food and the right macronutrient ratio of food and digest it properly, you should feel full and satisfied after you eat and energized. But so many people get done eating, they might feel tired, they might feel bloated, gassy, burping, whichever end it comes out of, not getting that nutrient. And how many people probably have leaky gut and they don't know, because there's so many different symptoms that will come from that. So it's really interesting when you learn more about all that. And that's why I'm doing the Functional Diagnostic Nutrition Practitioner program my goal is start it in May and start to learn that, because then I can order labs for people and put all this together to really personalize exercise and nutrition program, because it is the same thing, test, don't guess. And same with metabolic efficiency testing. If you can get all that data and really get a program specific for that client, well, they're going to work on their performance for sure. But overall, I think more and more it's looking at the longevity as our goal, that you're not going to be racing Ironmans, hopefully, for 50 more years. We should be, doing some other stuff as well in there.
Yeah. Well, and one thing I have done that I think is actually a really simple tool that people can do is just keep a log. Keep a log of what you're eating and take notice and write it down. How was my energy level, my mood, and how did I just generally feel within the last 30 minutes after my last meal?
Yep.
And how long did I take to eat that meal, and what did I eat? And you can start to identify some patterns.
Well, I tell people, I was just telling this to my client today, when you're eating your meal, feel like you're in Italy when you're, on vacation, you're sitting there eating like for 2 hours and just leisurely pace. And that's why I do intermittent fasting, because I don't have time to eat. I've been busy all day, and I can feel fine and energetic and wait till I get home and when I can focus and have a relaxing meal instead of shoving food down my throat in between clients or before I go for a workout, because then it doesn't digest and I just will go swimming and be burping it up or running, and it just doesn't work for me. So for me, workday schedule, it's easier not to eat and then wait to eat when I can sit, focus, and relax and enjoy that meal. So that works for me, but we're all different.
I like that.
So we're about 10 more minutes. I know I'm over time with you, but 2 other topics: my holistic method, element number 7, hydration, and number 8, the last one, is happiness and gratitude, laughter, play. So do you want to talk anything about hydration and performance?
Yeah, so I will. This has actually probably been my biggest area for learning about my performance personally. So I have had some pretty disastrous races as a result of not understanding what works for me from a hydration perspective. I had always felt that or assumed that when I bonked during a race, and when I meant bonked, I mean, throwing up, in the bushes during the last, 8 miles of a marathon of an Ironman, forced to walk, loss of energy. I always assumed that was, I didn't take in enough calories. And I finally decided one year I was going to dedicate myself to really trying to figure out what the right hydration was that I needed, and could I get my carbohydrate just from my hydration? Mm-hmm. And finally, I know that there are a lot of, I think there is, it's funny because Alex Hutchinson and I were just talking about this in his book, Endure, and he talked about a number of studies around hydration that have been done. We've all heard the, drink to thirst. We've heard, that the idea of replenishing the amount of water loss from sweat by consuming that equal amount, so you end up with a kind of a zero sum of water loss, has been debunked. But I think that it's very personal. I think that there are some people that can lose 5 pounds, 6 pounds of water weight. Let's say it's 4% water weight during a race and still be able to perform. And I think that there are others that if they lose 4%, they fall apart. And I'm one of them, right? Mm-hmm. So I think it's important to experiment. You can do a very simple sweat test by measuring your weight before you head out, by measuring your weight when you come back, and how much fluid you consumed or peed during the course of that exercise. And you can calculate what your fluid loss was. I think the other thing that you need to figure out in that, and this is going to take a little bit of lab work, or you can do a mail-away lab where you've got to figure out your sodium concentration. Mm-hmm. to figure out what percent of your sweat is sodium. It's very different, right, for every individual. Some people only lose, have 400 milligrams of sodium per liter, and others have, 1,600. Well, that makes a big difference. If you're losing 2 liters or 4 liters of fluid an hour, and you're at 1,600, that's pretty significant. If you're 400 and you're only losing a liter of water an hour, it's not so much, right?
Yeah.
Again, it's test, don't guess, understand what works for you and experiment with it. The other thing that I picked up that I think is been a really valuable tool is getting some urinalysis test strips. Mm-hmm. And so I'll make that a part of my process. Before I go out, I will actually take one of those test strips, I'll pee into a cup and test my specific gravity, and I'll even take a picture of it, the cup with the test strip on it, my watch, so I know exactly what time it was and exactly where I was from a specific gravity before I headed out. If I'm going out on a 5-hour ride, I might come back to the house 2.5 hours in, see where I am sweat loss wise, how much I've been drinking, and do another pee strip. Where am I with specific gravity? How am I feeling? Mm-hmm. And I've got a whiteboard right there in the kitchen, and I'll write it all down. Go back out for another 2.5 hours, test where I am. How did I feel? How was I performing? What's my heart rate? I've got all of this data now. Okay, what did I learn from that? What do I want to adjust for the next time? Does it get better or does it get worse?
Yeah, a lot of tweaking, and that's what the answer is always. It depends, because no one is exactly the same. So do you ever put just sea salt in your water and just add the electrolytes or ancient mineral drops, something like that?
I did try that. I actually worked with a nutritionist, and what we did is we actually concocted my very own sports drink with coconut water, sea salt, lemon juice, and we had some success with that. I'll be honest, I have just as much success personally with scratch.
Yeah.
So
see, I can't do that sugar because I am so sugar sensitive. It gives me a headache right away. So, but yeah. I mean, everyone's different. That's why you can't say everyone do scratch. Everyone just have water and sea salt.
That's right.
It's so different. And exactly with your experiment, you're just saying that means, everyone needs different amounts. And I always have this conversation with clients that they can tolerate so many more carbs than I can. And I'm better just sprinkling that Himalayan salt to my water bottle and be happy.
Yep, and I can do a half Ironman without a single gel. Yeah. Just working off of, because of the amount of fluid I have to take in, the amount of calorie that I get from Scratch Labs, and a few supplemental salt tablets. It's really all I need.
Yeah, that's great.
But you got to figure out for you. You got to figure out, and that's how I work with my athletes. Let's figure out what works for you. Let's start somewhere, and let's measure, and let's assess and tweak. Yep.
That's what you have to do if you really want to nail it.
Yeah.
Okay. Last topic, but I think one of the most important topics, especially for us type A triathlete, endurance athletes, is the happiness part, which to me means gratitude, play, laughter, being silly, letting loose. And I think I learned from my Life is Not a Race story that I wrote that I was just always serious, and, I'd have fun. I was personable and doing stuff, but I was just so focused on fitting everything in every day that, there's not often we have gratitude and give, big thanks every day, but for what we're able to do, but also just play and have fun and go just do something different. I think you get so strict in our training schedule that, we forget to do some other things or see other people and just live to that training peaks.
Yeah, right.
Thunder. So go with that. What do you think of people that need to have more fun in their life, or triathlon's it, or?
Yeah, no, make it fun for sure. Yeah. Make it fun. Find that race where you can wear the hot dog costume, right? During the run. You'll have so much more fun doing that race than you will being the real serious guy. I love what you said about gratitude. I think that having making that a practice is actually pretty important. For me personally, when I do my quiet time, when I do my meditation at night, when I'm doing my box breathing, part of what I'm doing is I'm going through a little bit of a process. And I basically work through 4 things as I'm doing my box breathing, and I'm in my what I call my mind gym, which is just, my space with my imagined surroundings. And it's the same place that I go to every evening. And I won't describe it because it's my personal space. But through that process, I am clearing my mind. I'm calming my nerves. I'm breathing deeply, and I'm feeling tall and strong. And I do 4 things. I evaluate the decisions that I made that I'm proud of for that day. I evaluate the decisions that I wish I had made differently. I don't dwell on them, but I address them quickly and then move off of them. And then I state who and what I'm thankful for and who I pray for. And if that's your thing, those are my things. And I sleep like a baby.
I think that's great. I have people do a gratitude journal when I'm doing my coaching program. I have them write just 3 things, or at least verbally say them. So that's great. Just what you're thankful for, what you had experienced, or some positive interaction, or paying it forward to somebody that just makes you feel good and happy.
Yep.
It's good. Yeah. So anything else you want to add?
Well, I only will add that I hope you will promise me to come back on to the Mile High Endurance podcast. Yes?
Yes, of course.
Okay, good. Awesome. Well, that's, and I'm really grateful that we got this time again together.
Yeah. Well, thank you. I wanted to have you come on the show as I'm, writing and researching, and it's better just podcast with people as yourself to talk about how to train and transform the whole athlete from the inside out with the holistic method. And as I try to create that program myself for coaching clients, I think it's essential to look at improving your performance and longevity in life, that we work on not just the exercise element, as we started talking about the exercise and nutrition part, but there's the whole person we need to look at from the inside and out. So thank you for sharing your areas that you've learned in your field and your podcast and researching yourself. So it's great information that we hopefully help someone else pick up a few things here today, and how you can implement them into your own training schedule and lifestyle habits to really improve yourself and your overall health this year.
Time well spent, and I look forward to our next time together.
Okay, thanks so much. And then tell everyone again where to find your podcast and blog, website links.
Yeah, absolutely. You can find us at milehighendurancepodcast.com, of course. We're on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram, and it's a weekly show. And I look forward to having you listen in.
All right. Thanks, guys. And make today the best day ever, and enjoy your training time.
Thanks for listening to the Whole Athlete Podcast. If you have any questions, feedback, or topic suggestions, let us know on Facebook or at wholeathletepodcast.com. You can help us continue and grow by leaving a review on iTunes. Thanks again, and see you next time.